Sometimes life brings us to moments that shake us awake, moments when trust breaks, when love feels distant, and when the people we counted on the most leave us questioning everything. In those moments, it's easy to believe we're standing in the ruins of what used to be. But hidden inside every heartbreak, every disappointment, and every painful ending is a message calling us to rise, to learn, and to rebuild ourselves in a way that is stronger, wiser, and far more grounded than before. This speech begins with that moment, the turning point where everything changes, and it shows how healing, forgiveness, and growth can transform pain into power, confusion into clarity, and endings into something unexpectedly meaningful. When God removes people from your life, it rarely feels gentle. It feels like loss, like confusion, like standing in the middle of a storm with no shelter in sight. But that moment you feel abandoned is often the moment God is clearing the path for something much bigger than you can imagine. Separation is not always a sign of failure. Sometimes it is the beginning of alignment. You may not realize it at the time, but every person who leaves your life creates space for clarity, space for growth, space for purpose. God does not subtract without planning to multiply, but before he multiplies, he clears. Before he builds, he empties. Before he sends new connections, he removes the old ones that can no longer walk with you into the next chapter. This is not punishment, this is preparation. There are seasons where you cling to people because of history, comfort, or the fear of loneliness, yet God sees beyond the moment. He sees where your heart is heading, what your destiny requires, and how certain relationships would eventually block the path ahead. When someone exits your life unexpectedly, you might feel like something broke. But in truth, something might have been breaking you. Holding on to the wrong people can delay your purpose, drain your energy, and cloud your inner voice. God hears conversations you never heard, sees betrayal you never saw, and recognizes intentions you never understood. So when someone leaves, whether peacefully, painfully, or suddenly, it is because he knew you would not remove them yourself. The human heart is loyal, sometimes to a fault. You may stay in spaces that no longer honor you. You may tolerate disrespect, silence your own needs, or shrink parts of yourself just to keep certain people close. But God refuses to let you bury your purpose under the weight of relationships that limit your growth. That is why certain doors close without warning. That is why certain phone calls stop. That is why certain connections fade even when you tried everything to keep them alive. God is not protecting your feelings in those moments. He is protecting your future. There will be nights when you replay old conversations, wondering what you could have done differently. You will question your worth, your decisions, and your role in the loss. But you must understand that people do not leave your life because you failed. They leave because their part in your story is finished. Some people are meant to walk with you only through one chapter, not the whole book. God knows the arc of your life better than you do. He removes what is temporary so he can bring what is permanent. He removes what is draining so he can give what is strengthening. He removes what is fragile so he can build what is destined. What you see as rejection is often divine redirection. You might feel like the door slammed in your face, but sometimes the slam is what wakes you up. It forces you to step back, breathe, reflect, and grow. It teaches you to trust yourself again. It teaches you to reconnect with your own voice instead of drowning it out for others. It teaches you to rebuild your confidence, your boundaries, and your identity. Every removal has a lesson, and every lesson pushes you toward the version of yourself that God designed long before life tested you. There are blessings waiting for you that cannot enter a crowded room. Purpose requires space, mental space, emotional space, spiritual space. When you are surrounded by noise, distractions, and mismatched relationships, you cannot hear God's guidance clearly, so He clears the environment. He doesn't do it to hurt you. He does it so you can finally see the path you were meant to walk. He does it so you can focus without being pulled backward. He does it so you can meet the people who align with where you are going, not where you were. In time, you will look back at the people who left and realize that losing them was part of finding yourself. You will see that the distance created peace, the silence created clarity, and the empty space became the starting point of a new chapter. You didn't lose anything. You were being prepared for everything. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Growth has a way of filtering your circle. As you rise, evolve, and become more aligned with your purpose, the people around you are forced into one of two roles. They either grow with you or they fall away. It is rarely personal. It is simply the consequence of elevation. When God pushes you into a higher version of yourself, the relationships that were built around your older self cannot always survive the transition. You start to change your priorities, your habits, your mindset, and your boundaries. And the moment your spirit shifts, the people who are attached to the older level of you become uncomfortable. They might not say it directly, but their energy shifts, their support fades, or their attitude becomes heavier. This is not a sign to shrink back. It is a sign that you are outgrowing the environment that once felt familiar. Growth exposes misalignment. Sometimes you don't even realize how mismatched a relationship is until you start healing. The moment you begin to value peace, chaos becomes intolerable. The moment you learn your worth, disrespect becomes unbearable. The moment you find direction, distractions stand out clearly. People you once considered essential may no longer match your pace or your purpose. They may still care about you, but they cannot walk the new path you're stepping into, and that is okay. Growth demands space. It demands truth. It demands honesty about who supports your elevation and who silently resents it. When God allows certain people to walk away, it is not because you pushed them out. It is because the season that tied you together is finished. There are relationships built on comfort rather than calling. You stay close to them because the history feels heavy, but the future feels empty. You know deep down that something has shifted, but you keep trying to force an old connection into a new stage of life. That resistance becomes emotional friction. Conversations feel different, effort feels one-sided, presence feels draining instead of uplifting. These are signs that your growth is outpacing the relationship. It hurts because the human heart wants consistency, but spiritual growth demands alignment. And God will not let you hold on to someone He has already released. You can fight the change for a while, but eventually you must accept that keeping certain people close will cost you your own development. When God elevates you, He protects you, and one of the ways He protects you is by removing people whose presence would sabotage the next version of your life. Some people cannot handle your growth because it exposes their stagnation. Some cannot celebrate your progress because it reminds them of their own unwillingness to change. Some fear your evolution because they benefited from your lesser version, the version that tolerated too much, spoke too little, and didn't know the value of your own gifts. As you grow, you break those patterns. You become more grounded, more aware, more intentional, and more selective. This makes certain people uncomfortable, and instead of rising with you, they distance themselves or create tension. Their departure is not a loss. It is a sign that your spirit has outgrown the space they once held. Growth is not just about improvement, it is about transformation, and transformation is uncomfortable not just for you, but for everyone connected to you. When you elevate, you challenge the dynamic. You disrupt expectations, you shift energy, you start asking for honesty, respect, consistency, and reciprocity. You stop settling for half effort or half truths. This pushes out anyone who is only comfortable with your lower boundaries. God allows this separation because purpose thrives in environments that support growth. He knows that the people who cannot handle your expansion will eventually hold you back, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So He creates distance not to isolate you, but to prepare you for relationships that match your new level of clarity and purpose. The beauty is that once the dust settles, you begin to feel lighter. You start realizing how much emotional weight certain relationships carried. You feel more focused, more balanced, more aligned. The space created by growth becomes the doorway to new opportunities, healthier connections, and deeper peace. The relationships that remain become stronger, more genuine, and more supportive. And the ones that faded become lessons that teach you not to shrink yourself to keep others comfortable, lessons that show you the importance of boundaries, lessons that remind you that growth is a gift, even when it feels like loss. There are moments in life when separation feels like punishment, but in reality, it is protection. When someone walks out of your life, especially someone you trusted, loved, or depended on, the immediate reaction is pain. You question yourself. You question your worth. You wonder what you did wrong, but with time, clarity begins to rise, and you start to see that God was shielding you from battles you didn't even know were forming behind your back. Sometimes the heart cries for what the spirit has already outgrown. Sometimes you beg to keep people that your future cannot afford. And sometimes God removes a person quietly, without warning, because leaving them in your life for even one more season would delay the blessings He has prepared for you. Protection doesn't always look like a miracle. Sometimes it looks like a breakup you didn't want, a friend who drifted away, a family member who pulled back, or a relationship that suddenly collapsed. It feels unfair, yet God sees conversations you didn't hear, intentions you didn't recognize, and dangers you weren't aware of. He sees the jealousy behind the smile, the betrayal behind the kindness, the manipulation behind the support. While you were praying for loyalty, He was protecting you from deception. While you were praying for connection, He was protecting your purpose. While you were praying for togetherness, He was protecting your peace. God's removal is never random. It is targeted, intentional, and deeply protective, even when it hurts. Sometimes the people you wanted to stay were the very people slowing your growth. They might have been pulling you back, planting doubt in your spirit, or draining the energy you needed for your next chapter. But because you cared, you didn't notice it. Your heart was loyal long after the relationship had expired. Loyalty is beautiful, but misplaced loyalty becomes a cage. You keep trying to revive connections that are spiritually dead, trying to fix bonds that were never meant to last a lifetime. You think you are holding the relationship together, but in reality, you are holding yourself back. And God knows that as long as you cling to what is familiar, you will not step into what is destined. So He intervenes. He creates distance. He exposes true intentions. He reveals what you refuse to see. And then He removes. Protection also shows up as blocked opportunities. Maybe you wanted that job, that partnership, that friendship, that door to open, but every time you tried, it fell apart. You blamed yourself. You felt inadequate, but God knew something you didn't. He knew the environment was not aligned with your growth. He knew the people involved would hinder your development. He knew your heart deserved better than what you were asking for. So He shut the door, and even though it frustrated you, that closed door became the shield that guarded your purpose from harm. In many cases, God removes people for reasons you only understand years later. You look back and think, if that person had stayed, I would have never grown. I would have never healed. I would have never discovered who I truly am. Distance brings revelation. Time brings understanding. Pain brings wisdom, and hindsight brings gratitude. What once felt like heartbreak becomes protection. What once felt like loss becomes redirection. What once felt like abandonment becomes preparation. Protection also means making space for peace. Some people bring constant emotional noise into your life. They keep you anxious, stressed, or doubting yourself. They demand so much and give so little. You don't notice the damage because it builds slowly. But the moment they leave, you suddenly feel lighter. You breathe easier. You sleep better. Your mind becomes clearer. That is the evidence that God protected you from something your heart was too attached to see. Peace is one of the strongest signs of divine protection. When someone leaves and your life becomes calmer, that is God saying, This was necessary. Even the pain serves a purpose. Pain shakes you awake. Pain teaches you boundaries. Pain shows you the difference between what you want and what you deserve. Pain removes the illusions you created around people. Pain forces you to see truth, and once you see the truth, you can no longer settle for less than authenticity, respect, and loyalty. That is protection too, protection from repeating the same wounds, protection from falling into the same cycles, protection from destroying yourself for people who would never do the same for you. At the end of it all, divine protection is not about keeping people away. It is about keeping you aligned with your purpose. Some people cannot walk with you into your destiny because their intentions, habits, or spirit do not match where God is taking you. So he removes them not to break you, but to build you, not to hurt you, but to heal you, not to isolate you, but to elevate you. There are seasons in your life when God's separation is not just protection, but preparation for the next level of your identity. Growth always demands space, and sometimes that space is created through loss. When God removes people from your life, it is often because your next chapter requires a version of you that cannot be formed in the environment you're leaving behind. Elevation is impossible without separation. Purpose expands, but old circles often stay the same size. And there comes a moment when God stretches your spirit so wide that the people who once fit into your life effortlessly can no longer stand in that same space. It isn't because they are bad or you are better. It's because your destiny requires a deeper level of discipline, clarity, strength, and self-awareness than the relationship could support. There are people who can walk with you in comfort, but not in calling. They fit the familiar version of you, the one you used to be, the one you were in your healing stage, the one who doubted, the one who needed validation, the one who lived small. But as you grow in purpose, God starts revealing parts of yourself you didn't even know existed. You begin to ask different questions, require different conversations, and seek different levels of energy. And the relationships that were built on old patterns can't survive the pressure of your transformation. The tension you feel with certain people isn't confusion. It's confirmation that you're outgrowing the chapter they still live in. God sometimes removes people because if they stay, they will talk you out of what He's calling you into. They will remind you of your past when God is pushing you toward your future. They will pull you back into habits you're trying to escape. They will distract you from the discipline you're trying to build. They will keep you small because your growth makes them uncomfortable. And God knows your spirit cannot afford to battle both their opinions and your purpose at the same time. There comes a moment when the noise must fade, and the only voice that can guide you forward is His. Preparation also means that God is reshaping your identity behind the scenes. Most people don't see the inner work, the healing, the struggles, the prayers, the tears, the nights you question everything, the mornings you force yourself to rise anyway. God separates you from certain people because the type of transformation He is working on requires focus and quiet. You cannot grow roots in chaos. You cannot build strength surrounded by noise. You cannot elevate while dragging emotional weights that slow you down. Separation becomes the soil where your new identity begins to bloom. Sometimes God removes people so that you can finally hear yourself. As long as certain voices were around you, your spirit couldn't speak clearly. You were influenced, controlled, pressured, guilted, judged, or overshadowed. But once those voices fall away, suddenly you realize the opinions you always feared don't matter. You realize you can live differently, move differently, think differently. You begin to make decisions based on purpose instead of pleasing people. That is the turning point where growth accelerates. God makes space not just for new people, but for a new you. Another layer of preparation is emotional maturity. God will remove certain relationships because you need to learn how to stand alone, not lonely but strong, not isolated but independent, not disconnected but grounded. There are lessons you can only learn in solitude. There are strengths you can only develop when there is no one to lean on. There is clarity you can only receive when the room is empty, and there is identity you can only discover when your heart has nothing left to cling to except God Himself. This emotional strengthening becomes the foundation for your purpose. Without it, you would crumble under the weight of the blessing God is preparing. Sometimes preparation also means God is aligning you with people who match your next level: mentors, partners, friends, teammates, spiritual alignments, but He cannot bring them into your life because you are still holding space for the old. You cannot receive the new when your hands are full of what is familiar. You cannot step into alignment when you're still attached to misalignment. God removes not only to protect, but to create room. You may not see it at first, but every empty place is actually an invitation for something greater. In the end, every removal is a signal that you are becoming someone who requires higher standards, deeper purpose, and cleaner energy. God is preparing you quietly, sometimes painfully, but always intentionally. Every person who leaves is a reflection of the person you are becoming, not the person you lost. There comes a moment in every person's journey when God begins to break the patterns that once felt normal. And when those patterns break, people often break with them, not because they are bad, not because you failed them, but because the season that once held them is closing. When God is elevating you, He cannot let you carry every relationship, every habit, every memory, and every attachment into the next level. Growth has a weight limit, and purpose has a capacity. You cannot rise while holding on to everything you picked up on the ground floor. That's why sometimes God separates you from certain people, because elevation demands emotional, spiritual, and mental space. Space is not empty, it is preparation, but many people misunderstand this. They see separation as loss, not realizing that loss is often the soil where purpose begins to bloom. You feel the emptiness, the absence, the quiet, and in that quiet, you assume something has gone wrong. But God often lets silence fall because voices that once comforted you would now conflict with your new direction. People who once motivated you would now limit your vision. The relationships you once relied on would now slow you down. So God creates distance, and in that distance, He begins shaping your spirit for something bigger than you imagined. It's not just about who leaves, it's about who you become when they're gone. When the noise fades, when familiar conversations disappear, when the support you thought you needed isn't there anymore, suddenly you're forced to face yourself, and facing yourself is uncomfortable. Growth always starts with discomfort. God uses separation to challenge the version of you that was shaped by others' expectations. Without those voices around you, you begin to think differently. You start asking deeper questions. You stop following the patterns you inherited and begin creating your own. That shift is the beginning of real, lasting transformation. Many times, God removes people because as long as they are around, you will remain the smaller version of yourself. You will shrink to make them comfortable. You will dim your potential to keep the peace. You will abandon your dreams so you don't lose the relationship. You will limit yourself to maintain the bond. But God loves you too much to let you live beneath the potential He placed inside you, so He breaks the bond before the bond breaks your purpose. That separation feels painful, but pain is often the first step of change. It pushes you to grow, pushes you to reflect, pushes you to rise above the version of you that depended on others more than you depended on God. There are also people whose energy was never meant to mix with your destiny. You didn't see it at first because comfort clouds vision. When you love someone, you overlook their patterns, their intentions, their flaws, and their distractions. But God sees their heart when you only see their presence. He sees their spirit when you only see their smile. He sees their impact when you only see their history. And when their presence threatens your purpose, He doesn't wait for you to let go. He removes them Himself. Not to hurt you, but to protect the blueprint He created for your life long before you understood it. Preparation also means learning to rely more on God and less on people. As long as you always had someone to call, someone to lean on, someone to save you, you never learned how strong you truly are. You never developed the ability to stand, to think, to trust, to believe without depending on human reassurance. So when God removes that support system, it forces you to discover the strength you didn't know existed inside you. You learn resilience. You learn independence. You learn faith. You learn that God is enough even when people are not. This shift builds the foundation for the purpose He is preparing you to handle. Another part of preparation is reshaping your environment. Many times, the environment you're in cannot sustain the version of you that is emerging. Old conversations can't feed new purpose. Old habits can't support new discipline. Old mindsets can't carry new vision. And old relationships can't nurture new levels. So God cleans your environment the same way a gardener cuts branches so the tree can grow. It hurts, but it is necessary for life to flourish. When He removes people, He is clearing the soil of your life so the seeds He planted in your spirit can finally break through. And slowly, without you realizing it, the emptiness begins to transform. Peace starts filling spaces where chaos once lived. Clarity begins replacing confusion. Strength grows where fear used to breathe. Purpose starts speaking louder than loneliness. And you begin to feel something rising inside you, something steady, something powerful, something prepared. That is the moment you recognize that every removal was a step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. When God removes people from your life, He is not leaving you empty. He is setting the stage for new, aligned connections that match your purpose. Many times, the absence you feel is not a void, it is an invitation. It is a signal that you are being prepared for relationships that will help you grow, not hold you back. But before those people can enter your life, God must first clear out the ones who are not aligned with where you are going. You may not realize it, but every removal creates space for the right connections to find you. Every separation opens a spiritual doorway for someone new, someone necessary, someone who brings clarity instead of confusion, peace instead of pressure, support instead of struggle. Alignment is powerful. When you are connected to people who match your purpose, things flow differently, ideas grow faster, healing moves deeper, opportunities appear naturally, your energy rises, your mindset expands, your confidence strengthens. Your spirit becomes lighter. You feel seen, understood, and supported in ways that old relationships never offered. But to experience these aligned connections, you must first go through the clearing phase, where God removes what no longer belongs. The problem is that many people resist this phase because they are attached to what is familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it is draining. Familiarity feels comforting, even when it is limiting. Familiarity feels stable, even when it is hurting you. But God is not trying to protect your comfort. He is trying to protect your calling. There are people who were only meant to walk with you for a season, not a lifetime. They were part of your healing, not your purpose. Part of your lesson, not your destiny. Part of your growth, not your future. When their season ends, the connection becomes heavy. Conversations feel forced. The energy shifts, something in your spirit feels off, but you keep holding on because you don't want to accept the change. You think losing them means you failed, but growth has nothing to do with failure. Growth is simply the process of becoming too big for the version of life that once contained you. And when that happens, God allows separation to protect what He is growing inside you. But removal is only half the story. The other half is the divine alignment that follows. God brings new people into your life at the exact moment when your spirit is ready to receive them, not before, not after, at the perfect time. These are the people who speak life into your purpose. The ones who challenge you to rise higher, the ones who don't feel threatened by your growth, the ones who don't drain you emotionally, the ones who bring peace instead of chaos. They encourage your discipline, your healing, your dreams, your spiritual maturity. They reflect the person you are becoming, not the person you used to be, and because of that, they fit effortlessly into your new chapter. Divine alignment often looks random at first. You meet someone unexpectedly, and something inside you recognizes them. A conversation changes your mindset. A connection inspires you to take action you were too scared to take before. A simple moment shifts the trajectory of your heart, and suddenly you realize this connection was orchestrated, not accidental. God placed them in your life the same way He removed others with intention, but sometimes you must walk alone before the right people arrive. Loneliness is not punishment, it is preparation. It teaches you how to hear your own voice, how to trust your own judgment, and how to stand strong without needing constant reassurance. When you develop that inner strength, you attract people who match it. When your spirit becomes healthier, you attract healthier relationships. When your purpose becomes clearer, you attract people who can support it. This is why the clearing phase matters so much. Without it, you would keep choosing relationships based on old wounds instead of new wisdom. Another part of alignment is timing. God will not allow the right people to enter your life while you are still emotionally tangled in the wrong ones. You cannot receive new blessings with hands still holding old burdens. You cannot step into divine connections while clinging to expired ones. So He removes, not to hurt you, but to free you. He pauses relationships to reset your spirit. He isolates you to elevate you. And the moment your heart is ready, He sends the right people, the right voices, the right opportunities, the right energy. When those aligned connections finally arrive, everything starts making sense. You understand why certain people had to leave. You understand why relationships shifted. You understand why seasons ended. You understand why the waiting felt long. Because the people coming into your life now are part of your purpose, not your destruction, not your distraction, not your delay. In the end, you realize that every removal was a setup for alignment. Every goodbye was making room for a better hello. Every ending was clearing the way for a beginning that matched who you were destined to become.